Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, diesel prices today were 199.9 cents a litre in Alice Springs, 300 cents a litre in Ali Korang, and 185.9 cents a litre in Acacia Hills. Now that you are the Chief Minister, when are you intending to bring your fuel price disclosure bill back to the Parliament to tackle the cost of living for Territorians?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and she's right. Fuel prices are extremely high off the back of nearly 20 years of a Labor government that did nothing but drive up crime, drive up the cost of living and drive people out of the Northern Territory. And it's absolutely shameful. And you know what, Madam Speaker? That's why the CLP is now the government, and that's why the opposition leader, who was part of a failed cabinet for 8 long years, is sitting on the other side. And so it's a bit rich for her to come in here, Madam Speaker, and talk about cost of living, because what the CLP is doing to address cost of living is significant. Where should I even start? We're addressing the cost of living for small business by removing payroll tax for small business, Madam Speaker. Some businesses will save $22,000 a year, which means the costs aren't being passed on to consumers, i.e. Territorians. We've backed in free swimming lessons for every child who goes to school from years 1 to 6, because not only is swimming such an important skill when you live in the Territory, but that life-saving as well. And that means parents don't have to use their school sports voucher to pay for their kids to get the basic necessities of life, and that's learning to swim, which means their school sport voucher is being spent on sport.
What is your point of order, Opposition Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Standing Order 110, relevance. It was a very specific question purely about fuel and the bill that the Chief Minister formally brought into the House. It didn't have a wide scope. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chief Minister, you've got the call.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. That's on top of all of the other work we're doing around 3-year trailer registration. Of course, we have brought online the country's most competitive first home build scheme with $50,000 grants for people to build their own home. That is the best scheme in the country, Madam Speaker, and we're very, very proud of that. And you know what we worked hard to make sure that grant would do is go towards the deposit, because people are finding it very, very difficult to save for a home, and that $50,000 can go straight onto the bottom line, which is making an impact. So we have a range of reforms, Madam Speaker.
Please take your call. Member for Daly, what is your point of order?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 110 relevance again. The question was pretty specific around the fuel price disclosure bill, which the Chief Minister intended to bring on, and she's not answering the question. So we'd just like her to answer that question. When are you going to bring the fuel disclosure?
Daly, please take your seat. It was specific. We always give ministers some latitude, so if you can rein it in, Chief Minister, it's your call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I was saying, cost of living is a profoundly important issue, and what we took to the election was a commitment around reducing crime, a commitment around rebuilding our economy after Labor absolutely dismantled and broke it and it tore it apart, which is why cost of living is so high. And of course, restore our beautiful, unique Territory lifestyle, of which a huge component is cost of living. So we've already implemented a wide range of reforms that we took to the election, because what we're doing right now is delivering on election commitments, and that's what we've done, and that's what we are working through. And of course, as a government, we will continue to look... Madam Speaker, the relentless interruption...
Look, I agree. Member for Daly, the Minister has heard your calls to be focused and relevant. I think this is as good as you're going to get.
She hasn't even touched on the fuel price disclosure bill. She hasn't even touched on it. She clearly doesn't want to talk about a bill she hasn't brought on.
Member for Daly, you've made your point. The Chief Minister's got the call. Her answer may not be to your liking, but it is her interpretation.
It's just despicable behaviour, disrespectful behaviour. I had 20 seconds. I was about to make my point, but you're too busy listening to yourself than you are listening to the answer. That's your problem, not mine. We're out there listening to Territorians. If you want a grandstand, fill your boots.
Member for Fong Lim, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is also to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, I am passionate about supporting the many hundreds of businesses we have in my electorate of Fong Lim, which, as you all know, is the business and industrial engine of Darwin. Now, some of the local hardworking businesses I frequently visit include places like Daily Eats, the Dinah Beach Yacht Club, Besser Cafe, the 1 Mile Brewery, and that's just to name the ones that I eat at more or less daily. Now, jokes aside, Chief, I am proud to be part of a government that backs our local businesses, large and small. And this year we delivered our historic payroll tax reforms, which will save businesses in Fong Lim and across the territory considerable sums of money. Chief Minister, I'm excited to hear that this is just the start. As part of our plan to rebuild the economy, how will we be cutting down on approval times and further supporting local businesses?
Chief Minister.
Good question.
Thank you very much, Member for Fong Lim. And your electorate is a fantastic place. It does have so many wonderful businesses, small, medium and large. And you and I have walked around and visited many of them. He is committed to Daily Eats. I've been there with him, Madam Speaker. It's a fantastic place. We went to Mates for Mates, many fantastic businesses in and around that Stuart Park area, East Arm and everywhere in between. And what's important to those people, and we were talking about cost of living earlier, ironically, Member for Fong Lim, is that it's easy to do business. And when you put business impost on when you put taxation impost on a business, they pass that on to consumers. That means everyday Territorians, it means the people in your electorate have to pay more, something that Labor did not fundamentally understand. So our significant reform around payroll tax reductions for small business and also excluding apprentice and trainee wages is really moving the dial for those businesses to employ more staff, invest in better product, better equipment, more resourcing, whatever it is they need to continue to grow as a business rather than paying more tax and then Territorians paying higher prices. It's a really significant and important piece of reform, and it makes us, again, highly competitive interstate, being one of the most competitive payroll tax jurisdictions in the country, and we're very proud of that. But we've taken another step further. We, again, as I mentioned in my previous response, are working through delivering on our election commitments. And one of our election commitments was the Approvals Fast Track Task Force. That was headed up by Mark Garraway, the former president of the Property Council, and a panel of industry leaders, and I thank him and the team. They worked really hard to develop the Saying Yes to Business report. Now, we've made that public. It identifies 70 key actions to remove barriers for small and medium business to drive growth in their business and growth in the Territory's economy. We've fully accepted 60 of them. We've accepted 10 in principle, and we also, another 2 have already delivered, which is a great start. We are very focused on reducing delays, cutting red tape and reducing timeframes across government by 50%, as we promised Territorians we would. And so, Madam Speaker, we will fast-track 48 of the 70 recommendations in the next 12 months. And Member for Fong Lim, I know you hold us accountable to that, and so will your community, and rightly they should. We want to be held accountable because we're excited about making it easier to do business in the Territory. So some of those fast-track commitments, just to give people a taste: improve the timeliness for payment of invoices for tradies, very important for cash flow. Expand builders' licence renewals to 4 years, extend food business registrations to 36 months, exempt low-risk electrical works from needing a certificate of compliance, and extending renewal periods for RSAs from 3 to 5 years. So that's just some of what's to come, Member for Fong Lim, but it's great to have you in the team representing the good people of Fong Lim.
Member for Daly, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Minister, you have spent $21 million of taxpayer funds on truancy officers, yet school attendance rates have dropped in the Barkly, Big Rivers, Central Australia, Top End and East Arnhem regions this year. Will you now admit that this reheated policy is a failure and agree to invest this funding in programs that actually engage children and young people with their schooling?
Minister for Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Daly for the question. And I'm glad, Madam Speaker, that he's asked a question about attendance because coming to government, we did bring back attendance officers, and under the 8 years of Labor government, they failed to make sure that kids were going to school. And we know that kids going to school leads them into a path to meaningful employment, Madam Speaker. So over 1,500 kids were not included in attendance data under the previous government. They were forgotten, hidden, not counted, and therefore lost in the system through a Labor government that did not care about whether kids went to school or not. This happened under, as I said yesterday as well, the opposition leader was one of 4 education ministers, clearly turned a blind eye to this going on, and they just didn't care, which has now left our government with this momentous task, Madam Speaker, of getting these kids back to school. So the Northern Territory has had 8 years of declining school attendance rates. And I note the member for Daly interjecting, but he might like to actually listen to the answer to his question, to which he obviously wants the answer to. So the Northern Territory has had 8 years of declining school attendance rates under the former Labor government, falling from 80.8% in 2016 to 71.7% when they left office just last year. Yesterday we talked on law and order, and I've no doubt that some of these offences that are being committed by youth are a direct result, Madam Speaker, of these youth not going to school. They haven't had the opportunity of an education. Our school attendance officers that we have brought in are engaging with families and kids right across the Territory, working with those families, talking to the children about getting those children back into the classroom to give them an opportunity for a better education, a better life, and to give them the skills in pathways to real jobs. So we've had targeted support from school attendance officers, which plays an important role to ensure we turn around and increase attendance right across the Territory in some of the most challenging regions. And we know, Madam Speaker, that out in remote and very remote areas, it is very challenging to get kids to school. But what we know is that we have great teachers, we have great schools, and we need the attendance officers to work with these families, boost the attendance rates back in schools, which you'll see better results, better NAPLAN results, and also better pathways to meaningful jobs for these children.
Member for Casuarina, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to Minister for Mining and Energy. Minister, in the media recently, we have heard several major milestones in the development journey of the Beetaloo Sub-Basin. Delivering on the CLP government's commitment to rebuild the Territory economy is closely tied to the development of affordable and abundant energy from the Beetaloo Sub-Basin. Minister, you recently attended Beetaloo Energy Australia's operation in the Beetaloo Sub-Basin with the industry and the investment stakeholders. Minister, could you please update the Assembly as to the outcomes of the trip and the work our government is doing to deliver affordable Beetaloo gas to the Territorians?
Minister for Mining and Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Casuarina for this very important question, because he knows, Madam Speaker, how important it is to have cheap energy into the Northern Territory. He knows, Madam Speaker, that the direct jobs, the indirect jobs, is going to bring to the Northern Territory jobs such as mechanics, hairdressers, boilermakers, riggers. All those indirect jobs are going to be able to have an opportunity to be able to work in the Northern Territory and expand their business. And as the Chief Minister said, us raising the payroll tax threshold is going to give an opportunity to grow. So this is a really important question. And last month, I visited Beetaloo Energy, formerly known as Empire Energy, their project in Carpentaria, and I was proud to be there as 2 milestones were achieved, Madam Speaker. The Beetaloo Energy conducted the largest fracture simulation in Australian history, and also reaching agreement with the traditional owners, which was endorsed by the Land Council for the sale of their appraisal gas. So that means, Madam Speaker, that Territory gas has now got a pathway to the Territory market. Madam Speaker, the resources sector is central focus to our government strategy to rebuilding the economy. Gas, mining, agriculture, defence and tourism. Madam Speaker, they're 5 words which are very, very important, because we're going to focus on that, because they are going to help us rebuild the economy. Our government is making history with the development of Territory resources, having the first beneficial use of gas agreement signed, ready to go to allow to get gas out of the ground, into the Territory market, into our generators to keep the lights on. Madam Speaker, that is going to be a great new industry that's happened. We know that for 10 years there's been a lot of work, a lot of money been spent in the Beetaloo, but there's been no gas flowing out of it, no royalties paid, no revenue for those businesses in there doing all the hard yards. This, Madam Speaker, is going to be a game changer, and we're hoping to get gas out of there either later this year or early next year. So the first time, Madam Speaker, there's going to be a clear pathway for getting Beetaloo gas into our market, which will mean royalties, which will mean jobs. Madam Speaker, I was also privileged to speak to the traditional owners down there, Joni Williams, and she was working for Beetaloo Energy. She's known for her fight for those people and dealing with it, and she's there working, and she, as with other TOs, support that industry, Madam Speaker. That's because there's going to be a well-regulated gas industry which is going to supply jobs, it's going to supply royalties, it's going to put gas into the Northern Territory market, not only into the power and water, Madam Speaker, but into places like Granites and MacArthur River, and then potentially down to the East Coast, because we know, Madam Speaker, there's going to be a gas shortage, and the gas is available in the ground. Some 200 years' worth of gas is going there. So this is going to be an absolute game changer. Ms Wilson told me this is an opportunity for her to stay on country, for her and her family to have jobs on country. And that is for these it was super important, to be able to stay on country and have jobs.
Minister. Member for Arafura, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Minister, your Chief Minister had this to say about your twice-failed truancy officer initiative. The CLP's plans wouldn't be able to be measured on publicly available attendance data, and we look forward to that scrutiny and watching the trend change over the years. So far, the trend is very much on the way down. At what point will you decide that spending $21 million on truancy officers is a waste of taxpayers' money and start investing that money into engagement strategies that will actually work to get kids to school?
Minister for Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I love getting questions on education because as the Education Minister, what we saw over the last 8 years was a failed effort from the previous Labor government to get kids to school. We know that attendance and literacy and numeracy was failing under their watch. As I've said numerous times in this House, the opposition leader was one of 4 education ministers who did absolutely nothing to make sure that these kids were going to school.
No interjections.
They were actually to make sure that these kids were going to school and they were getting educated for a better life, and so that they can go into meaningful employment. Across the Territory, Madam Speaker, yes, we have brought back attendance officers. They work right across the communities. They have the no school, no service in shops. We've made sure that they are out there talking with families, working with them, talking with the students. During Term 2, they did 401 compliance notices and 111 infringement notices were issued by authorised officers. For the same period in 2024, there was 148 compliance notices and 6 infringement notices were issued, which is an increase of 253 compliance notices and 105 infringement notices. We know that by working with the attendance officers, working with the school community, with the families, this is one way that we are going to get back children back to school. And we hold fast on that, Madam Speaker, and as the Minister for Education, I know that our attendance rates are not that great. We absolutely acknowledge that, and that's why we are working hard with the department, with those school attendance officers and out in the communities to make sure we get these kids back to school. So I've just, in the previous question I highlighted the fact that under the previous government there was 1,500 students that were not included in the attendance data. So shame on them for not actually having them in the main attendance data. There was a secret little roll on the side that these 1,500 kids were in. There's about 500 of those children now, Madam Speaker, that we have managed to get through with working with families, with the attendance officers back in school. That's what we're trying to do on this side of the House. We want kids to go to school. We absolutely acknowledge that, there is a lot of work to do, but the main thing is we want kids to go to school. We're getting on with the job of doing that work, which is a far cry from what the opposition did in their 8 years when they were in government.
Member for Fanny Bay, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd just like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for opening up the conversation on the cost of living, so I'd like to expand on that if I could. My question is for the Treasurer. Treasurer, the CLP has changed over 2,000 Territorians' lives, getting them out of Labor's never-ending rental cycle and onto the property ladder. In the Fanny Bay electorate, there's almost 50% of rentals, and I know a lot of those tenants want to get themselves into the property space. These real results for Territorians and the expansion of housing options available to them is why the CLP has extended the program in our first budget. Treasurer, can you please update the House on how this program is helping Territorians to put down roots in their home as a result of this CLP government?
Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the member for their question. And the member for Fanny Bay is absolutely correct. The CLP's Homegrown Territory program has changed thousands of Territorians' lives by fulfilling their dream of home ownership. And that's great to hear, Madam Speaker. And whilst the issue of home ownership, especially for young first home buyers, continues to plague the nation, data from the Department of Treasury and Finance shows that Territory is well and truly bucking that trend and changing that problem here in the Territory. Almost a quarter of those the CLP have helped into their own homes are young Territorians, Madam Speaker, under the age of 28, and that speaks volumes for what we're doing in the housing space. 85% of those who received grants were millennials or younger. What's more, home buyers under our government's homegrown program have overwhelmingly been couples, showing that this scheme is helping families put down roots here in the Territory and staying in the Territory and helping to grow our economy. The CLP, Madam Speaker, has changed thousands of Territorians' lives with the Homegrown Territory grants and is literally helping them build their future here in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, these new Territory homeowners are not just building their dream life in the Territory, but are helping us rebuild the Territory too after Labor left Territorians with no future to look forward to. Over a fifth of those who have achieved home ownership under CLP work in the health sector. Treasury data shows that the grants have attracted other professionals working in education and business and people who are central to this government's requirements to build our economy and service the needs of other Territorians. Madam Speaker, the CLP promised this would be a year of action, and with over 200 new builds and counting in the pipeline for everyday Territorians, the CLP is delivering on that promise, Madam Speaker. This is a marked difference, Madam Speaker, from Labor's years of inaction when it came to increasing the Territory's housing supply and boosting home ownership. In 2023-24, Labor's last full financial year in government, a measly $747,000 in grant money was used to stimulate the Territory's residential construction industry. Madam Speaker, obviously no one wanted to build under Labor because under the CLP's watch, Madam Speaker, over $5 million has gone out to Territorians into their pockets to kickstart our residential construction industry. Madam Speaker, without the CLP stepping in so that Territorians finally had the necessary backing to build new homes and become homeowners, we would have lost young Territorians, their growing families and important healthcare, education and business workers to other states. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to be part of the CLP government and delivering on the Fresh Start and Homegrown Territory grants to benefit the Territory.
Member for Guadja, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Minister, more than 100 days ago on the 20th of May, you stood in this parliament and said you would release the findings into the government's review into Yipperinya School, a review undertaken after community members raised serious concerns about the school not meeting compliance and registration standards, including child safety standards. Minister, the community is still waiting to see the findings of that review. Can you please inform the House whether you've received the review, and if so, when are you going to release the review, and when will you let me have a copy of that as you promised?
Minister for Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's great that it's an Education Day today, so that makes me happy as the Education Minister. With the Yipperinya School, under the previous Labor government, several complaints were made suggesting Yipperinya School wasn't meeting all of its obligations under the Education Act. And as Mark Monaghan was the Education Minister at the moment, they were failed to be addressed under that time. The school has, in December 2024, there was an assessor that gave a report with 26 recommendations to improve how the school is run, covering governance, finance, curriculum and student safety. That report was shared confidentially with the Department of Education and the school, but is not appropriate for public release. I do want to say, Member for Gwadja, if you would like any more information, we're happy to give you a briefing on that, but that report will not be published. The School Council has been briefed on the findings and has been required to submit monthly updates to the registrar showing their progress. They continue to do this, and one key recommendation was around the financial management, was completed in June this year following an independent review. So there, as I said, there was that special investigation. It would not be tabled generally. It's taken, those recommendations will be worked through over the next 12 months. There has been, a statutory body has been appointed, statutory manager, taken over the council's responsibilities for now, while the former council members stay on in an advisory role. And it's a constructive step, Member for Gwadja, to help the school reset and strengthen its foundations. And I know there's been a lot of talk around Yippa in your school, and it's a great school. I have been down there to see the work that they have been doing, obviously before all this happened. But what I can say, Member for Gwadja, if you would like any more information than that, we're happy to give you a private briefing or a briefing on that, but it is not appropriate for that report to be tabled. Thank you.
Supplementary, Madam Speaker.
Supplementary, Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister for Education, you said on the 20th of May in Parliament, I don't have that information in front of me. It's an operational issue. When I get that information, I will share it with the member for Gwadja. My question is, Minister for Education, why now are you not willing to commit to releasing the report as you did then? What are you trying to hide? I am not the community. The community deserve to hear this.
No arguing across the chamber. Minister for Education, you've got the call. I think you've already answered this, but you've got the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Member for Gwadja, I did actually just answer your question. I did not have that report at the time. I did say to you that since that report's come out, it is not appropriate to table or pass on that report. Happy to give you some more information if you would like to get in contact with the office, or we can actually reach out to you and give you that information. It is not for public, out there for the public to view. It will not be of any benefit to anyone in the community. So the School Council has been briefed on the findings and has been required to submit...
Minister, can you just pause? There is no point of order, Member for Gwadja. She has answered your question previously. She's reiterating it. There is no point of order. Please sit down. Minister, you've got 25 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Member for Gwadja, I don't actually think the community have been not heard, or, that they are not going to get the information. There are many members down there in Alice Springs that the school or those people are happy to come and have a conversation with, or you can go back to those community members and give that information if you like. That's your choice, but I have answered the question.
Member for Karama, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, under our government's plan to rebuild our economy, defence is one of our 5 strategic areas of focus. And this month, our defence capabilities have been on show. Like many other people in my Karama electorate, I've heard the roar and seen the lights of fighter jets in the sky over the past few weeks as part of Exercise Talisman Sabre. Chief Minister, can you please update the House on how the Territory is playing a vital role in Australia's largest military exercise, and what plans our government has to further reinforce the Territory's importance in the defence of our nation? Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Member for Karama. And I know how passionate you are about rebuilding the Territory's economy, and a huge component of that is our importance in the Indo-Pacific. And defence is a significant injection into our economy. That money goes to feed Territorians. When defence money is spent in the Territory, it predominantly stays in the territory. So pound for pound, bang for buck, defence dollars spent here is feeding territory families. So it's very, very important, and we have more to gain there. There is more work we can do to continue to show the Australian Defence Force and our allied partners that we are the allied training partner of choice. The territory's indisputable location, our vast training opportunities and exercises, our basics, our bases, they all provide a huge opportunity. And this year, Talisman Sabre has just concluded its domestic part of the exercise, and it concluded here in the Northern Territory. It ran from 13 July right through to 4 August, and that 4 August component is now moved over into PNG. And so this is the largest Talisman Sabre exercise since its inception in 2005, which is huge. It saw over 42,000 personnel training between the Northern Territory and Queensland across 19 nations, which is huge. And of course, we had Australia represented, our allied partners in the United States and Japan. Very, very important. For the first time, we saw 1,500 troops here across the Northern Territory from the Australian Army's 2nd Division. You might have seen them out at East Point or down at the waterfront. There were military people everywhere, and we had the chance to speak to them, one opportunity to speak with them, and they were certainly enjoying their time in the Territory. But we had some significant firsts. Of course, the first live firing of a precision strike missile in Australia happened from Mount Bundy training area all the way over to Bradshaw, and that was an excellent opportunity for training, particularly for our United States partners. We, of course, had Australia's first with HMAS Prince of Wales, the UK aircraft carrier under the stewardship of Commodore Blackmore, here in Darwin, which really showed the significance. And to back that up, we actually had the Right Honourable John Healey, the United Kingdom Secretary of State for Defence, here for that flagship event, of course, with our own Defence Minister, Richard Marles. And it was fantastic to have him here in Darwin. I had the chance to catch up with very significant allied partners, of course, the Joint Operations Command Commander General Nagumo Kenichiro from Japan, and Deputy Commander US Indo-Pacific Lieutenant General Joshua Rudd. And later in the year, I will be travelling to Japan to further unify the Northern Territory and Japanese relations. I acknowledge Richard Finch from INPEX is in the gallery today, and to further our economic and defence investment and cooperation here in the Northern Territory.
Member for Johnston,
what is your question? My question is also for the Minister for Defence. I also have many people in my community who have things to say to me about fighter jets. On the morning of Territory Day, I attended with many people here a citizenship ceremony here in this House, welcoming new Territorians, many from conflict-affected regions. And that night during the celebrations, the fighter jet flyover caused distress to many people in my community who contacted me wondering what was going on and asking with fear and PTSD. I also understand that major events received a petition asking for the flyovers to be reconsidered or removed from the day. Has the government consulted with those affected before including such displays in the future? And what was the total cost of the ADF F-35 flyover? Who paid for it? Was it funded by Territory Major Events or by the ADF? Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Member for Johnston, for your question. What I know is that our Australian Defence Forces pull on a uniform every single day to defend our freedom, to defend our democracy, and to defend our people. And everyone who lives in this country is part of that fight and continued defence of those freedoms. And we hold them out and thank them for their service to our community, to our nation, and to our people.
Just pause, Chief Minister. The clock wasn't on. Sorry, Member for Daly. I assume you were standing for another reason. Continue, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And our Defence Forces have a very significant role to play, and we are privileged here in the Northern Territory to be home to more than 5,000 defence personnel and more than 5,000 defence veterans. And we are doing many things with the Minister for Veterans Affairs to make the Territory a place where they want to stay following their career. Now, we have the privilege of then being part of very significant training operations, like I just mentioned about Talisman Sabre, a huge huge operation here in Australia to really allow that interoperability with our allied nations and partner defence forces in our region and further abroad. Every other year, of course, we host Pitch Black. Again, a huge, I think last year we had 13,000 Air Force personnel from a range of nations here in Darwin, focusing on that important training to protect the very freedoms that this parliament has the opportunity to enforce and have that democracy. Without it, we would not have...
Minister, please take your seat. Member for Johnston, what is your point of order?
1110 relevance. What was the total cost of the ADF F-35 flyover on Territory Day and who paid for it?
Chief Minister, you've got the call. You'll be uninterrupted from this point.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am the Minister for Defence NT, not the Minister for Defence. That would be Richard Marles MP, and you would have to ask him. I don't run the Air Force, so that's a question for him. But what I do know is that we are a proud multicultural community here in the Northern Territory. We have embraced multiculturalism for our entire being. We've had, of course, trade relationships into the region since time began. I mean, the Yolngu people trading with the Macassans. These are well-trodden paths for the Northern Territory, and they're things we defend fearlessly. I mean, I have two colleagues who were born overseas, at least two. There's probably more. You know, the Northern Territory is a very important place, and I'm very proud to have hosted a citizenship ceremony for Territory Day, as every Chief Minister has since self-government. I'm not really sure what else to say to you, Member for Johnston, other than we support our ADF, we support our allied partners, we thank our defence men and women who pull on that uniform every day to protect our freedom.
You've finished your response, Chief Minister? Oh. Do you have a point of order, Member for Johnston?
Point of order 1110. Did the Territory contribute financially to... You don't...
Okay.
Is the answer no, that it was paid for by the
Commonwealth? Take your seat. The Chief Minister actually answered that part of the question. She said that it wasn't paid for out of the Northern Territory government budget. Is there another question? Member for Wanguri, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations. I'd like to speak, thanks. Minister, 2 weeks ago, the CLP Northern Territory Government hosted its inaugural Northern Territory Investment Summit. And what a fantastic and energising event it was. I was fortunate enough to attend and saw firsthand the strong interest from international investors and the positive energy in the room. If I recall, there were over 80 organisations across 12 countries, many of them are our neighbours. It was clear there was a real momentum building behind the Territory's economic future. Given that this is the government's year of action, certainty and security, can the Minister please update the House on how the Investment Summit is helping position the Northern Territory as a globally competitive investment destination and the impact on the jobs, business confidence and long-term economy of the Territory?
Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations. Silence. She will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Member for Wanguri, for the question. I know how passionate you are about your electorate and the opportunities a strong economy give to your constituents, especially those who operate small to medium businesses in your electorate. So, as the member for Port Darwin, I'm equally excited about what happened in this space, and as the Minister for Trade, Business and Asian Relations, it's my job to convince and attract and persuade not just investors from across the country, but investors from across the world that the Northern Territory is the place they need to be looking to secure their financial future as we work to secure ours. So, economic growth, as we know, is absolutely critical, and that's why, Madam Speaker, that we as a government partnered with the Darwin Major Business Group to run the Territory's first investment summit, which was held here from the 15th to the 17th of July, something that has never been done before. We have never had these people come to the Northern Territory before, even though we know that if we want people to invest here, they have to understand what it is that we offer And what we offer is an incredible array of opportunities. So bringing together 150 delegates, Madam Speaker, investors from around the world travelled to Darwin from companies that are based in Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Switzerland, Vietnam, China, India, Kuwait, New Zealand, United Kingdom and the United States. And to a person, Madam Speaker, they said they had no idea what the opportunities were here in the Territory until they came to see it for themselves. And I say shame on those on the other side that it took us bringing this investment summit here into the Territory it took that. Nothing had been done before to do that. So well done, particularly to the team from the Department of Trade, Business and Asian Relations who worked so tirelessly to put this 3-day program together, which most critically held an immersive journey so that the people who attended this summit could see firsthand. They got to experience our tourism opportunities. They got to see what our infrastructure is. They got to see what the energy opportunities. They got to visit and talk to the people who are going to bring gas online into the Northern Territory and deliver the best gas opportunity in this country that has ever seen, with enough gas to keep the lights on in the country for at least the next 2 centuries. So keynote speakers, presentations, international and national presentations allowed us to really show what the Territory has to offer, and I'm so pleased to be able to now continue that work as we sell the story of the Territory to our near and far neighbours, Madam Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition, what is your question?
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Seniors. Minister, you parade around claiming to support seniors, but when push comes to shove, you and your team are responsible for ripping out $12 million from critical land servicing work for a new 120-bed aged care facility in Palmerston. And this week we have the Aged Commissioner of Australia travelling around the Territory talking to seniors about aged care. Minister, this isn't just a spreadline sheet, it is a slap in the face to our older Territorians, our aged care workers and our families supporting them who are crying out for better senior services in one of Australia's fastest growing regions. You didn't consult, you didn't front up and you just axed the funding and hoped that no one noticed. Minister, why were you responsible in signing off on gutting $12 million of funding tied to the 120-bed aged care facility in Palmerston, and have you spent the time explaining this to our senior Territorians?
Minister for Youth, Seniors and Equality.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think opposition leader is confused because we got a minister specific for the aged care, which is Minister Edgington. So I would pass on this question to Minister Edgington to respond.
Minister for Health.
You need to look onto the portfolio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Silence,
and I thank the opposition leader for the question. And what we do know, Madam Speaker, is that there is a shortage of residential aged care facility beds in the Northern Territory. And this has been impacting on aged care-related discharge delays at the hospital. And on any given day, Madam Speaker, there's anywhere between 60 and 80 aged care patients in our hospitals here in the Northern Territory. So we've been working and having many conversations with the federal government since coming into government. This is one of the critical shortages that we've been facing. And I must say that, of course, Labor was in government for 8 years prior to us coming into government. So really the question must be asked, what did Labor do during those 8 years when it comes to supporting and working with aged care patients and providing the facilities that aged care patients need here in the Northern Territory? So we've picked it. This is the real issue, Madam Speaker. What I can say is that the federal government recently promised $60 million to contribute to an aged care facility here in Darwin. The long-standing arrangement under our government is that our position has always been that we need a 120-bed facility here in the Northern Territory, and what we've what we have said is that whilst the federal government has committed $60 million, our position has always been that the Palmerston Hospital site is the preferred site to build new aged care facilities. So what we've committed is not only the land, but we've committed to delivering the headworks for the new aged care facility. So to come in here and suggest that there's been $12 million ripped out of the budget is actually misleading the parliament. We've committed right from the start. We've picked up where Labor did nothing here in the Northern Territory to focus on aged care. We've been working with the feds. There's a promise of $60 million. We're committing the land. We're committing to doing the headworks for when that facility is ready to go ahead. What we've also done is exempted pay.
Minister, take your seat. What is your point of order, Opposition Leader?
110 around the conciseness of the answer. The other part of the question, which the Minister hasn't referred to at all, is has anyone gone and met with seniors to explain this decision of the $12 million being ripped out of that part of the budget?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, aged care is a responsibility of the federal government. The former Labor government did nothing to advance that here in the Northern Territory. We're working across the board to get this facility. We've committed to providing land and the headworks to make sure that that project goes ahead. Thank you.
Member for Karama, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Attorney-General. Attorney-General, in 2022, the former Labor government made sweeping changes to the Anti-Discrimination Act that blurred the line between real harm and everyday opinion, certainly confusing those of us, including myself, who are strong supporters of free speech. They made it unlawful to offend or insult someone and removed long-standing protections that allowed faith-based schools to employ staff who shared their religious values. The CLP strongly opposed those changes at the time, committed to reversing them before the 2024 election, and won a mandate to do so. Can you please update the House on how the CLP government is delivering on that promise and restoring fairness and balance to the Anti-Discrimination Act?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes, Member for Gwaja, what is your point of order?
Order 1. I ask you to make a ruling. This is preempting debate. The bill was introduced today.
Look, you can do that. In past parliaments, you haven't been able to do that. In this parliament, you can. So continue, Attorney-General, with your answer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and for your ruling as well. And thank you to the member for Karama. I know that you are passionate about this because your community continues to talk to you about this issue since this was introduced by Labor in 2022. And of course, you have some wonderful schools in your electorate, some of which are faith-based schools. And so I'm sure that they are really keenly watching what is happening in the parliament this week. And Madam Speaker, Territorians would remember that we opposed the bill that Labor brought forward in 2022, which did erode that freedom of speech. It made offence something that you couldn't do anymore, saying offensive words, which was subjective, like who thought something was offensive or not. And it left the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, one person, to decide whether that was the case or not. And of course, we believe that was an overreach, and so did Territorians. We spoke to them about this leading up to the election and post the election, and they said the same thing. They also asked us to revert the protections for religious schools so that religious schools and faith-based schools out in the community could employ staff and teachers that could teach their faith, their same faith, and not have to worry about civil proceedings in case they chose a teacher that wasn't of that faith, which, again, Territorians right across the place called for us to make that change if we were fortunate enough to govern, which of course we now are. And it included the parents of kids, of Territory kids, those parents who wanted to have the choice to be able to send their children to a faith-based school and know that all the teachers in that school were of the same faith and that same ethos and that same beliefs. And I think Territorians believe that's a really part of being Territorian. We are a very multicultural community. We're also a very multi-faith community, and so it's really important they have those protections. Madam Speaker and member for Karama, during the time of when I became Attorney-General and this moment now, we went out to the community to consult on the fact that we were going to make these changes and just ask for some feedback about what that might look like for them. And there was a range of people we spoke to, including the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, obviously, and TCAT, because they're involved in this, the health and LGBTQI plus communities, including Scarlet Alliance, NTAHC, Health Equity Matters, the legal and community stakeholders, and the religious organisations as well. Anti-Christian schools, Catholic schools, Zion Church, Greek Orthodox, everyone that you could possibly think of. I sat down with them individually and as groups, and they shared feedback, which is why we ended up not repealing altogether the offensive clause. We've actually made changes to those words so that they are more of a case where we're not going to accept hatred. You cannot anymore, after this legislation is passed, incite hatred, severe ridicule or serious contempt under these new laws that we'll be putting forward, and I look forward to debating them in the next sittings, Madam Speaker.
Member for Mulca, what is your question?
Thank you, Chief. The question to the Chief Minister: what is the longest amount of time that a child has been held in a watch house? The ABC has department data stated 25 days. If this is incorrect, what is the longest amount of time that a child has been held in a watch house?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Member for Mulca, and I'm very glad that you raised this question, because what was reported was incorrect. And so what we know is that the main amount of time a young person would spend in the watch house is 3 to 4 days. Now, it was widely reported that there was an 11-year-old kept in for an extended period of time. That's not true. The person was actually 12. They were brought to the watch house after the court had closed, which is why we are working so hard on court reform. And so the court had closed, which means bail could not be processed. So they stayed overnight, and then as soon as court reopened in the morning, that person's bail was processed, and in fact, the court then remanded that person. If my memory serves me correctly. So we're not seeing, sometimes adults are spending around the 20-day mark if they're someone who's been sentenced and is waiting to transition into a place, into one of our correctional facilities, either Alice Springs or Darwin or Berrima, wherever it might be. I was just going to say, I think the Corrections Minister might have a bit more data for you, Member for Mulca, so I'll just pass over to him.
Minister for Corrections.
Speaker, I can outline the process involved, Madam Speaker, in relation to when a young person is remanded in custody. So, as the Chief Minister just pointed out, the young person is taken to the watch house and then brought before the court as quick as possible. Unfortunately, because the Labor didn't invest in the courts on the weekends are struggling to keep up with the load, so sometimes they miss that cut-off period. But what happens, Madam Speaker, as soon as a young person is dealt with by a court, and that could be a court or an after-hours court, and either released on bail or remanded in custody, that young person...
Could you take your seat, please, Minister? What's your point of order, Member for Johnston?
1110 relevance. The question was, what's the longest period of time a child has been held in a watch house? Any child has been held in a watch house.
Take your seat, please, Member for Johnston.
So, Madam Speaker, I'll go on and continue what I'm doing, explaining the process. And this is the process that we're dealt with, and we certainly are refining it because we know, Madam Speaker, that the previous Labor government failed to invest in any infrastructure in the correction space whatsoever. They had the catch and release program, and their answer was, if you commit a crime in the Northern Territory, we'll let you go, Madam Speaker, because we're not going to invest in the infrastructure needed to put those criminals behind the bar. Unlike the CLP government, Madam Speaker, we are focused on the victim. We are making sure there are going to be less victims here in the Northern Territory, and our laser focus is on protecting the victims. And that means if you do a crime in the Northern Territory and you're remanded in custody, you're going to go into custody. There's going to be some rehabilitation programs and those sorts of things happening whilst you're in there, Madam Speaker, to try and break that cycle of offending. But we're going through to make sure that these young people get put into the Holtz Detention Centre as soon as possible. And, Madam Speaker, the process is that as soon as they're remanded in custody, they're delivered to the Holtz, and a youth justice officer will come and pick them, young people up if they have to. They make special trips to get them out of the watch houses, to get them into Holtz, to get those wraparound services as soon as possible.
Expired, Minister. Member for Blaine, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment. Minister, a number of residents and families in my electorate in the suburb of Bellarmac have spent more than a decade living with the stress and uncertainty caused by defective homes built under a failed affordable housing scheme. The previous government failed to act, leaving these homeowners in limbo. Minister, can you please update the House on how this government has brought long overdue closure to Territorians by the Bellarmac Homes disaster? Thank you, Minister.
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Blaine for his question. Madam Speaker, the member for Blaine since day one has been in my office advocating on behalf of the people of Palmerston and the people of Bellarmac, trying to get the best deal possible for those, and this government has delivered, Madam Speaker. Buying your first home should be one of the most exciting and rewarding moments in someone's life, a foundation for the future and a chance for stability. But for some Territorians, that dream turned into a nightmare, which was drawn out for over a decade. Under a failed affordable housing scheme that kicked off in 2009 under the Labor government, 18 elevated homes were constructed in the suburb of Bellarmac. These homes were built with serious structural defects, leaks, corrosion of cladding and steel frames, and tiles lifting and cracking throughout, Madam Speaker. They were not even built to withstand cyclones, Madam Speaker. These families were left trapped in properties that were unsafe, unsellable and steadily falling apart. They were ignored by the former Labor governments and forced to carry out the financial and emotional burden on their own. But unlike the former government, Madam Speaker, we are not content to leave Territorians in limbo. Once again, we have acted quickly and cleaned up a mess that went on for too long under Labor. You could say, Madam Speaker, that I'm a fixer. As soon as we came into office last year, we took swift, decisive action. This government instructed my department to negotiate the voluntary acquisition of the affected properties. This is well and truly underway. As part of that process, Madam Speaker, we will seek agreement from landowners to assign their court-awarded compensation to the Territory. This will allow the government to pursue the builder directly if owners choose not to or are unable to, another thing the previous government failed to consider or act on. Once the homes are acquired, Madam Speaker, they will be demolished and the land returned to open market through a public auction, ensuring the community can finally move on from this sorry chapter. That's the difference with this government, Madam Speaker. We don't walk away from tough decisions. We do the right thing. We get on with the job of delivering for Territorians right across the Territory, no matter where you live. We're restoring trust not only in housing, but in government and in the institutions meant to protect Territorians. Labor left this problem to rot. We are fixing it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Corrections. Minister, the Office of the Children's Commissioner has said that despite numerous requests, she was not consulted on your rewrite of the Youth Justice Act. This appears to be a pattern of your government attempting to reject and undermine our independent statutory bodies who are there to strengthen our democratic decision-making. Minister, could you please explain to the Chamber what you understand the Children's Commissioner's role to be and why you did not meaningfully consult with her on this bill?
Minister for Corrections.
Madam Speaker, look, thank you for the question. The Children's Commissioner's role is to investigate child abuse. So that's what her role is to do, and I'm sure she does a great job. And, Madam Speaker, I can also say that the Children's Commissioner meets with the corrections every fortnight. So when she says she not consulted, doesn't know what's going on, well, she has regular meetings with the department. I've met with her. I know the Attorney General's met with her. So she has an opportunity to talk to us, and we can talk with her. But our role, Madam Speaker, is about getting on with keeping the community safe. And that's what we're going to do. And that's what we're laser focused on. I feel like a broken record. We are laser focused on keeping the community safe. We've been in office for some 11 months now, or 12 months, and that's what we are doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, we were left with such a mess that we can't fix this overnight. This is a big ship to turn around, Madam Speaker, and the ship is turning around. But we are doing it. We're going to continue to make, as the fixer said, the tough decisions. We're going to make sure that the community is safe. And, Madam Speaker, and that's our number one priority. We're going to keep the community safe, we're going to rebuild the economy, and we're going to restore our lifestyle. 3 principles which are pretty simple, pretty easy to say, and we are steadfast focused on doing that, Madam Speaker, and that's what we'll continue to do. We know, Madam Speaker, that under the previous government, that it had programs in place for wraparound services and rehabilitation. Let me give you an example of one program, the Back on Track program, Madam Speaker. A Back on Track program.
Just pause for a minute, Minister. What is your point of order, Member for Nuclear?
Back on track. You said that she just investigates child sexual abuse. I'll give you a second go because that's not exactly everything she does.
Member for
what
Nightcliff,
does the Children's Commissioner do, and why didn't you? She said you didn't meaningfully consult. Why didn't you meaningfully consult with her?
Okay. Your call, Minister.
I'll go back to what I was talking about, what the previous government did. The Back on Track was a program from 2019 to 2024, funded $2 million a year. The last financial year went up to $7 million a year, Madam Speaker. So that's a total of $34 million spent on that program. And, Madam Speaker, have you guessed how many participants in that program over that whole time? 342. 342. And the next question is, how many participants actually graduated that program? So $34 million for 35 successful participants. That's almost $1 million per child. So when you talk about wasting taxpayers' money and programs, Madam Speaker, that is why we have to stop these programs. $1 million per child is just unacceptable. What we want to do, Madam Speaker, is focus on keeping the community safe and making sure we're not wasting taxpayers' money. That's why, Madam Speaker, we've got a master plan. We're working towards making sure the infrastructure is value for money, and we're going to move the prisons to halts for value for money to make sure that we can rehabilitate these offenders and turn them into better people so they break the cycle of reoffending. That's what the previous Labor government failed to do. They failed to break that cycle. We're working hard to do that. Young offenders are going to school. We're doing rehabilitation programs. We're working hard to make sure the community is safe.
Member for Goyder, what is your question?
My question is to the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community Development. Minister, ensuring Territorians have access to a clean and reliable supply of drinking water is a key priority of mine and this government. In many remote communities, water stress is a real barrier to new housing and infrastructure. Water security is essential to economic growth, health and community wellbeing, and we are committed to ensuring secure water for all Territorians. Minister, could you please update the chamber on the practical steps this government is taking to improve water security in remote communities, and what funding are you providing?
Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Goyder for this important question. And I know that over the last few months he is really one of the strongest advocates we have when it comes to securing water for Territorians. Madam Speaker, last month, along with my colleague, the Minister for Logistics and Infrastructure, Bill Yan, we announced the CLP government's $25.1 million package over 4 years to deliver clean, dependable water to our most remote communities. This funding will help unlock a further $100.4 million from the Australian Government's National Water Grid Fund, supporting critical upgrades to water systems in high-needs areas. We're working closely with the National Water Grid Fund to replace ageing infrastructure, drill new bores and support future growth. The redevelopment of Numbulwar's water supply system will be the next project submitted to the National Water Grid Fund. Madam Speaker, a new higher quality water source has already been located through bore drilling under a successful Phase 1 submission, with Phase 2 focused on supporting a proposed new subdivision. Improving water supply directly addresses issues like overcrowding, poor health and social disadvantage in remote communities. This is a practical step in our year of action, certainty and security. The CLP government's investment will help leverage further funding and accelerate development. Numbulwar, for example, has been facing long-term water challenges. Securing water is critical to building new homes and supporting regional growth. Madam Speaker, 2 joint NT Australian Government funding proposals are currently before the National Water Grid Fund. $17.85 million to upgrade the water supply at Gallawinku, $14.98 million for new water infrastructure at Ganyangara, west of Nhulunbuy. The Northern Territory Government is contributing $5.6 million and the Commonwealth $26.5 million, with the Gumarch Corporation contributing $1 million for the Ganyangara project. Madam Speaker, to date the Territory has secured $102 million for 7 water projects across communities, including Yuendumu, Milingimbi, Numbulwar, Maningrida, Yirrkala and Ganyangara. Madam Speaker, I'm proud of our government's commitment of $25.1 million to provide remote Territory communities with clean and reliable water, and I know this will make a difference to everybody living in those remote areas. And I want to thank the member for Goyder for this very important question. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And while I'm on my feet, I move that any further questions be placed on the written notice paper.
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In line with Standing Order 115, I will just give a further response to the question asked by the member for Johnson yesterday. Yesterday, Member for Johnson, you asked a question in relation to the air quality monitors at Winnellie, Stokes Hill and Palmerston. It was quoted there that, or asked, is that air quality monitor being disabled to hide the pollution levels people are being exposed to? I have further answer to that question. Madam Speaker, to imply that the public, to imply to the public that the Independent Environment Protection Authority are deliberately trying to hide or lie to them is a serious allegation. The member for Johnson has suggested that the NT-EPA have switched off the Palmerston Ambient Air Quality Monitor in an attempt to hide pollution levels. Madam Speaker, the National Association of Testing Authorities, referred to as NATA, standards refers to the international standards that are used to ensure technical compliance and reliability. In accordance with those standards, contractors conduct routine monthly maintenance and calibration procedures at all air quality stations in the Northern Territory. I have been advised, Madam Speaker, that maintenance and calibration works were carried out from the 21st of July to the 24th of July 2025, prior to the dates the member for Johnson accused the NT-EPA of switching off the monitors, and it is only during this period that a brief interruption of data may have occurred. However, I have sought information from the department and from the experts, Madam Speaker, have assured me that all data remains within the required standards. As always, and as Territorians should be assured, real-time and historical air quality data measured at the 4 ambient air quality monitoring stations are available to the public on the NT-EPA website. Madam Speaker, it is so important, I think, when we're in this House, to ensure that whenever we're making these accusations that we are able to back these up. If we want to ensure that we're doing politics differently in the future, if the member for Johnson would like to ask me these types of questions before making those public accusations, I'd be more than happy to undertake and seek the answers she requires. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.